Looking at a match in GEDmatch, there is a lot of information. I've showed you before in a video on how to use the one-to-one tool, so let's dive into what the results of that one-to-one tool are actually telling you. Howdy, welcome to Family History Fanatics, where we love helping you climb your family tree and have fun along the way. I've had viewers ask me several questions about the one-to-one and what the information is showing them, how they should be able to interpret that information, what parts are useful, what parts aren't, and what some of these changes actually mean. So let's go through in more detail about what we can do here. So here is the one-to-one form. And what you need is you need two kits, yours and somebody else's, or really any two kits, to compare them together. First off, what I'm going to use myself and a brother. I'm going to be showing everything with the graphics and the position. I'm not going to change the build. I'm just going to be showing the regular resolution. And we'll just leave it at that. We're not going to change anything else to start with. So when I do a compare, it is going to have a couple of things. First off, at the top here, this is the legend. This tells you what these colors mean when you're seeing them later on. It tells me that I'm comparing these two kits, me and my brother. And it tells me what the settings that I put in that form was. So that's just the upper part here. Now we get into each one of the chromosomes. And in this case, what there is there's a table and then there is a graphic. The table here is showing you numerically where each one of these segments are. So I can see in this first part, there's a segment that starts at about 4.5 million as far as the megabase position, and it ends at about 11.1 million in the megabase position. It's about 11.8, so just almost 12 centimorgans long. And there were 489 SNPs that were found in this. So let me draw out what we can see here. So down in the graphic, this is where that first segment is identified. This second segment then is identified with this. The third segment is from 96 to 120, which is going to be right here. This fourth segment is this one right here. And this fifth segment is this one on the end. Now, as you're looking at these, what you can see is really the blue bars are what identifies the segment graphically. And there is some differences between this. So we see that there is always going to be some red lines in between any two of the blue bars. So for instance, we have red lines there, we have red lines there, we have a big section of red lines there, and on throughout. Now, if you're looking really closely, what you'll see also is you will see that there are some other colors. So right here, it looks like a little bit of a pink. Right here, there's some orangish, and here is another little orange one as well. We can go back up to our legend to see what that means. And in this case, it's saying that, hey, there's some very large gaps between SNPs. In other words, there's some big places where we haven't actually tested anything. And that brings me to my next point when we're looking at the graphic. The table, as I mentioned, shows us where the start and where the end position of that segment is. It tells us the centimorgans and it tells us how many SNPs. Graphically, though, what is being shown is SNPs. And in this case, what we're being shown is one little tiny bar is 14 SNPs. So for instance, we have this first one is 489 SNPs long. So from here to here is 489 SNPs. Now likewise, if you'll notice, this next one from here to here, that's 1,694 SNPs. So it's really about 4 times as long. And graphically, as you're looking at it, Yeah, that's about 4 times as big. If I cut that in half and cut that in half again, each one of those is about as big as that first section. So in the graphic part, you are looking at the SNPs. Segments, again, are identified by really the blue bars, and then the little lines itself, each individual line is going to be a SNP. Now, there's more SNPs on the chromosomes 1, 2, and 3 than there are on 20, 21, and 22. So if you'll notice, this was a 1 to 14 reduction. If I scroll all the way down to 20 to 22, the shorter ones, hey, this is only a 1 to 5 reduction, a 1 to 3 reduction. So each one of these little bars represents 3 different SNPs as opposed to 1 different SNP. Now the colors on the top, the red, yellow, and the green, they mean something as well. So fully green means that you and the match got both of these from your parents. One from your mother, one from your father. Now with siblings then, you would expect that sometimes where you actually both got the exact same DNA. If you're not siblings, you might have some of those by chance, but it's not going to be as much, and I'll show you that here in just a moment. The yellow means that you got at least one part the same as that match, and the red part means that it doesn't match. In other words, you both have different DNA at that particular point. So because humans share a lot of DNA, by chance, we match at least one a lot of the time, and we even match 2 quite a bit of the time. So you can see if we're talking about a specific segment, and I'll look at this segment right here. We can see that throughout this entire segment, hey, there is a chunk here that is all green, but there's still little bits of green elsewhere as well. Most of it is yellow. Now remember, this is a reduction where it's actually each one of these lines represents 14 different SNPs. When we expand this out, you'll see it actually looks a lot different with this. So this big section of green, this is a section where me and my brother received the exact same DNA from both my mom and my dad, which is also his mom and his dad. Whereas these other sections that are yellow with, some green interspersed, the green means we happen to match both, but that's really by chance. It's probably because my mom and my dad have the exact same DNA at that point as well. If I go back, I can actually make a couple of changes that are going to change how we view things. So I'm talking about my brother, and I want to now click on the show only the fully matched segment. So I'm not going to be looking at the half match. I just want to see the fully matched. I compare it again. Now you'll notice that the red, yellow, and green bar of that is the exact same across the top, but on the bottom, I don't have near as many blue bars because this is only looking at the fully matched segments. So there's this one segment that we just looked at here, and then there's another one right on the end that are fully matched. Everything else is just a half match or no match at all. My table is also smaller. It's now just 2 segments because that's all that is fully matched. Usually you're only going to see fully matched segments on full siblings or what's called a double first cousin. A double first cousin means that they have a set of grandparents, 2 sets of grandparents that are the same. Basically siblings marrying siblings. So in this case, I can just look down and I can see that yes, some of these chromosomes have much larger segments than the others. All of that really is just by chance. The fact that I have a really large segment on chromosome number 11, it doesn't really mean anything in this case. It just means that by chance, me and my brother got a larger segment on number 11 that is fully matched. If we scroll all the way down to the bottom, what we will see is we will see some information that is helpful to us. Now, in this case, I'm just looking at the fully matched segments, and there is 962 centimorgans of fully matched DNA. That's right in line with what you would expect with siblings. Let's go and let's unclick that fully matched, and this is probably more of what we would want to see, is just the half match. Since almost all of your matches are just going to be half matched, that is typically what people are talking about when they say how big of a match they have. In this case, you can see 2,800, which is right in line with what we would expect full siblings to have. Down here, we have some other information. We know that the largest segment is 141 centimorgans. Now, this is not necessarily that helpful, but where it can be is if you have endogamy in your family. In that case, you're actually looking for the matches that have the largest segments as opposed to those that have the most DNA shared. The larger segments usually means a more recent ancestor that you share in common rather than the smaller segments. I have 57 shared segments with my brother. Again, this isn't quite as helpful. There are some cases where, again, with endogamy, if you share a lot of DNA, but there's a lot of segments that DNA is divided up into so that the average is really small, then that is a good indication that they're much more distantly related than others that have, say, one large segment or a couple of large segments that you share DNA with. And some of the rest of this is just for information. So for instance, there was 170,000 SNPs that me and my brother both have in our kits because we tested at different places that they were actually able to compare to see. And 4% of these SNPs were fully identical. So actually the majority of this was fully identical, but there's lots of no matches or only half matches in between. Now, just looking at this view, you can't really tell that 74% of these are fully identical. So let's go back one more time and let's change another setting so that we can see that. If we go up to the window width and we go to full resolution, now each pixel of that line is going to be one SNP, whereas before it was making it 1,000 pixels long, and so it had to have, each pixel represented 14 SNPs. Now we're going to have the full resolution. We're going to be able to see everything in detail. This is a lot of information. You'll notice first off, the table remains the same because it is just the table. But then we get down to the graphic, and I can take and slide this graphic over, and you can see this is going a long ways to finally get to the end. But not only that, as I'm looking at it, you can see there's a whole lot more green on there than there was before. Now, most of that green is still interspersed with a little bits of red and yellow, but there is a lot of green. In fact, 74% of it is going to be green. And that's just because we share so much DNA in common. So let's look now in particular at one of these no match regions. And let's just toggle back and take that off at 1,000 so we can see that real quick here. And what I'm going to be looking at is this one right at the beginning. On this graphic, it looks like it is almost all red with a couple of little bits of yellow in there. But when we go to the full level, we can see how much it really is. Now, that same thing that I'm looking at is this section right here. You'll notice there's actually not that many little red tick marks. But again, each mark now represents one SNP, not 14 SNPs, but one SNP. That's why this graphic is so long. Because humans, any humans, share a lot of DNA, you're never going to see a big solid red box here. You're always going to see a few little bits as far as what is being called as a no match. And so there has to be a certain number of SNPs in between for it to be called a no match. So you can have two reds that are 200 SNPs apart, and it'll still be considered part of the same segment. Let's blow this up just a little bit more. And you can see just how much there really is right there. So we go through this first part, no SNPs until we get to that first red, and then it looks like there's just a couple of SNPs, another red, a couple of SNPs, another red, another SNP, and then a red, and then we go quite a bit more till we get to the next red. Well, there's just not enough distance between those to be able to say that, oh, this in-between part is a match, even though this other's not. And so that's why overall, even though there's very few reds here, there's enough that it's calling this entire segment a no match. If you'll notice between this last red and this red right here, there's actually a large amount where we don't see any reds at all. And so that's why it's calling it a segment. So let's go back and let's look at some other things that we can change and the effect they're going to have on it. We'll go back to just the 1000 resolution so we can see the whole chromosome here. And I'm going to change up the SNP window size threshold. Now, this is going to be how many SNPs have to be matching for it to call it a segment. Not every place along the chromosome has SNPs. Remember, there was a few places where it says, hey, there's not very much SNPs right in here. So if I go and I change this to, let's say, 700 SNPs. So I need at least 700 SNPs to call this a match. We're going to go and compare, and you'll notice this table is shrunk. Instead of 5 segments, now there's only 3 segments. 2 of those segments had less than 700 SNPs. In fact, that first one there, it only had like 490 SNPs. And so it's no longer considered a segment in this case. Now, why would you want to do this? Well, in some cases, you want to make sure that there's enough data to really call it a SNP. So if you are just going by any kind of matching whatsoever, what we saw from the big full resolution is that we all share a lot of DNA in common. And so we're going to have segments that might be 400, 500, 600 SNPs long that really aren't a segment. They're not a real match. It's just by chance and the fact that we're human that we share that in common. Another thing that we can do is we can change the size of the segment. So in this case, its default is 7. Let's say I want to go up to 10. Some of those smaller segments are going to go away. You'll notice now on the tables here, none of these segments are below 10, when I may have had a couple of these segments that were below 10 before. And I can go down and I can see, hey, I'm only sharing 56 segments. Before I had 57 segments. Different times people may want to be looking at what they call a real matching segment, whether it is just based on SNPs, whether it is just based on Centimorgans, or whether you're using a combination of both of them together. I'm going to put this back to the 7. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to click this bottom one here, prevent hard breaks. The default is to create a break when the distance between SNPs exceeds 500,000 base positions. As I go and look at this, one of the things that you'll see is those orangish color that was here before, it's not there anymore. And that's what hard breaks is doing, is it's taking it out. What hard breaks can also do sometimes is find places like this where there may not really be a break there. It was only a break because there was big gaps in the amount of centimorgans. In this case, there was actually no matches there, which was causing that. But let's go down and let's look at the total. I've gone now from 57 segments to 40 segments. I haven't changed how much match I have by too much. A little bit, but not too much. But what has happened is basically 17 of those segments have been pushed into one of the other segments because the only reason why they were divided is because there wasn't very many SNPs that were tested in between those two start and end points. I almost always have the prevent hard breaks clicked on, because I haven't found many instances where I want to actually have these hard breaks. I get better results, more accurate results by not having them. Now, we've been looking at me and my brother here. We share a lot of DNA. You saw 2,800 centimorgans. So let's go over and let's look at me and somebody who is much more distantly related. I'm going to click on the prevent hard breaks and we will go through and see. You'll notice that, hey, we don't share anything on chromosome number 1. There's no table there. We have some on chromosome number 2, 3, 4, and then nothing until chromosome number 14, and that's it. 5 total shared segments between me and this person, about 90 centimorgan. The one-to-one tool, one of the major advantages it has is that the centimorgans that it reports as matching is much more accurate than the one-to-many. The one-to-many is sort of a quick and dirty. So if I actually looked at the one-to-many, I believe that this one showed that we matched at about 82 centimorgans. But once it does the more accurate one-to-one, it shows that we're matching at 90 centimorgans. I mentioned before that with me and my brother, 75% of all of our SNPs are the exact same. Here's somebody that only matched 90 centimorgans on, that just over 50% of our SNPs are identical. I'm going to go back and I am going to make this the full resolution so we can see that. So it's not quite like my brother's. There's a lot more red, and we also see some more red bunched up together. There's not as much green, but the majority of this is still green, with yellow being very close behind. So when we go and we take a look at this segment here in particular, what we can see is that there is no red marks inside of this, and that means that there's no place where we don't match on this blue band. But there's still a lot of places on this where we match both of our chromosomes, and then everywhere else we match at least one of the chromosome. And so this is considered a segment. Let me go and take off that full resolution again. The data then that we can get from this is, first off, the amount of total centimorgans that we share. That's going to give us an indication of what relationship we may have. You can use the shared CM tool over on DNA Painter to input this 90 centimorgan, and it's going to give you a set of relationships that this person potentially could be. The other thing that we can do is we can take a note of where we share DNA with this person. So I know that I share on chromosome number 14, that I share on number 4, on 3, on 2, in a couple of places. I can then look for matches that also share in those locations. And if we all share the same segment together, that's called triangulation, and it is a good indication that we, the 3 of us or more of us, share a common ancestor that we can be able to trace back to, because that segment came down from that common ancestor and was passed on to us. We're still related to a lot of people who we don't triangulate with, so that's not the only way that we can help prove a relationship. So another thing when looking at these results is we see that, hey, these segments visually might look long or might look short. So in this case, the length of the blue bars by itself visually doesn't matter. What really matters is from this table here, what the centimorgan length is. For a lot of the matches that you're going to be looking for, it's going to be starting at 20 centimorgans or so, or even more for that one segment. If you have people that you share multiple segments like this with, you're hoping that there's a 20 or maybe even a 30 centimorgan segment that is part of that. In this case, I have, looks like 1, 2, 3 of these segments are over 20 centimorgans. The other 2 are just above 10 centimorgans. So visually looking at this length of these blue bars is not important. What is important is the centimorgans. So the major use of the one-to-one tool is really to confirm how much centimorgans you share and to identify what specific segments that you share DNA with a match. You're then going to use other tools along with this information in order to perform triangulation or segment searches to find other matches and create groups that you share common ancestors with. Now, I hope this explanation of the one-to-one tool was helpful for you. If you have any questions about it, please put it in the comments below. Now, I mentioned triangulation. If you'd like to see a video about triangulation, you can watch this one up here. But if you want to learn something more about DNA, then watch this video down below.